Hello there, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive here at the Sky News Centre. It's time to see what's making headlines tonight, and we're joined this evening by the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. They'll be with us now right up until midnight tonight. We appreciate your time. Thank you both for joining us here on Sky News this evening. Let's have a look at what's on some of those front pages as they are coming into us. As you can imagine, the crisis in Israel and Gaza very much dominating. Concerns over the looming Israeli ground invasion leads the front of the Financial Times tomorrow. Their headline, residents flee Gaza City in fear. Similarly, here's the eye for you. No escape. Gazans try to flee but face Israel's revenge. The Guardian says thousands have already fled ahead of the expected invasion, whereas the Telegraph reports that Israel has already sent in some forces and is warning of a powerful offensive to come. Likewise, the Mail tomorrow, Israel's tank strike into Gaza. The Express carries a plea from the Archbishop of Canterbury to give innocent people in Gaza the chance to survive. The Times tomorrow focuses on the plight of a disabled teenage girl who was one of the people taken hostage by Hamas attackers last week. The Mirror says police in the UK have been placed on high alert for possible terror attacks connected to the conflict in the Middle East. And the Sun tomorrow reports that the BBC has agreed £9 million in compensation for Freddie Flintoff after his crash injuries while working on the motoring show Top Gear. And a quick reminder that by scanning the QR code that you're going to see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch with us, so do check that out. As I say, we're joined tonight by Zoe Williams and Anita Boateng. Again, great to have you on the programme tonight. And let's have a look at some of these papers. A lot to get through, as ever. Starting with, Zoe, your paper, The Guardian, and a very powerful picture. The photos are all very powerful at the moment, aren't they, of the relatives and friends of people taken hostage by Hamas gathering at a press conference in Tel Aviv today. You can just see the distress on that poor lady's face. And The Guardian deciding to go with what's happening in terms of Gaza and the, 1 million people who've been asked to flee to southern Gaza and leave the city.
Yeah, it's interesting the way they're covering, because they present that quite neutrally, the Gaza story. But, of course, the Israelis did say earlier today 1.1 million Gazans had to evacuate from the north to the south, and that is widely understood by the international community to be an impossible task, an impossible feat. You know, for a start, the largest hospital is in the evacuation zone, and there are plenty of people in there who can't be moved. The roads are already destroyed. There's very little petrol. There's very little of anything. So they're in a siege situation, and an evacuation has been ordered, which it's understood, and certainly the Americans have already put pressure on this from this point of view, to be merely kind of symbolic, that there's a very real sense that whether they evacuate or not, the invasion will commence and the attacks will commence. So, you know, it's very neutrally told, but it's a devastating story and one that the international community is really worried about.
Anita, let's bring you in now, and as we talk, have a look at another front story, or front page, I should say. This is the front page of the FT Weekend tomorrow. They are also going with the same line: residents fleeing Gaza City in fear, and a lot more detail to unpick in this particular article.
Yes, and they talk about, you know, the UN in particular. Zoe mentions the international community has said that this would basically be calamitous, the amount of displacement that we could end up seeing, and the expectation is that it's going to be sort of a period of 24 hours in which civilians are going to be expected to leave this area, and we are talking about 1.1 million people in an area, in a sort of area that only really encompasses about 2 million. So that's sort of half the country, if you can imagine that, you know, in the UK. And the FT has some really good detail about the sort of way in which people are being forced to flee. So on cars, on foot, on donkeys, in minibuses, and the roads have been destroyed, and the fuel shortages. It's clearly quite a lot of kind of chaos. And I think that one of the things that really strikes one reading this article is the Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, obviously saying on the Sabbath day, which is obviously quite unusual to happen in a Jewish country like Israel, this is only the beginning. So really, this is the international community and also Gazans very much braced for what is going to be quite a dramatic event taking place over the next sort of 2 or 3 days.
Interesting also to add, of course, that Hamas are telling people in Gaza to stay.
And that is something that does come up a lot. That a lot of Palestinians are trapped, not just by the raw kind of facts of the shortages and not just by the impossibility of the roads, but the fact that the Hamas are telling them that this is just Israeli propaganda and they can't leave. Now, they don't have any plausibility whatsoever, Hamas, but if that's what they're saying, then obviously you face reprisals from them as well if you do try and leave. So it's just unthinkable what this must feel like.
And one thing to say is that this obviously has historical significance because back in 1948, a lot of this is steeped in so much history of which, the British played a major part. But in 1948, one of the things that happened was quite a lot of Palestinians effectively at that point fled. And that was part of what led to the kind of creation of Israel. So there's a bit of obviously a huge part of this is wranglings over the territory itself. And so even telling people to evacuate could be seen and certainly is being interpreted by Hamas as a kind of land grab or provocative act. And so you have these civilians are very much caught up in that. And I think what we see throughout the papers, whether it's The Guardian or the FT, is civilians on both sides being utterly devastated.
It just goes to show, doesn't it, what a difficult and hideous situation it is. Let's move on to the Daily Telegraph. They lead with a line that we had here on Sky News about 7 o'clock this evening. News actually of Israel has already been over the border. We believe special forces moving into Gaza and then back out again to carry out a number of sorties, in particular try and get more intelligence about hostages. So some people reading into this wondering, is this the beginning of the ground invasion, or is this, just the first few tentative moves over?
Another thing that comes out in the Telegraph story is that, just as Hamas are trying to kind of wage this propaganda war, they're also using the Palestinians as human shields. So they're using hostages as kind of leveraging against the Israelis, and they're using the Palestinians as human shields. And there is absolutely no limit to the kind of cruelty that they're prepared to wreak, just kind of to protect themselves. It's interesting. I think the reports are that the Israeli army only went in for the first time today, but of course, from a Palestinian point of view, there have been multiple airstrikes. 1,800 Palestinians have already been killed. A huge amount of territory has already been reduced to rubble. So it probably feels, slightly theoretical whether they've just made opening forays, whether the ground invasion will start on Sunday. From a ground point of view, they already haven't slept for 4 days.
Talking of a ground invasion, if we have a look at the front page of the Daily Mail, Anita, we get an indication, don't we, of what's amassing on the border, this 300,000 strong troops in terms of reservists and the tanks. I mean, look at that picture.
Yes, and I think we're going to see so much alarming footage over the next few days, but this certainly gives a sense of the escalation and nature of escalation of the conflict. As Zoe was talking about, the Telegraph piece talks about 750 targets that have already been, attacked in some way via airstrikes in Israel, but now this is really the sort of heavy artillery rolling in preparation for what is going to be quite, it seems to me, an intensive period of fighting. And so this is the sort of localised incursions, but that is part of the intelligence gathering and the preparations and looking for weapons ahead of what is going to be probably some very fierce fighting.
And let's just finish by having a quick look at the Times. It's always the stories of the individuals which are most powerful, aren't they? And this is, in particular, a story of a vulnerable girl. She's 17 years old. She is severely disabled, and she is one of the people we believe has been taken by Hamas at that music festival.
It's so appalling, when as soon as you hear anything about that Supernova music festival, the absolutely premeditated, determined extinction of joy in that act really strikes you. But also the fact that many of the hostages are severely disabled. The 17-year-old has muscular dystrophy. She's completely unable to care for herself. They hope the father is still with her. They have no
idea.
Intelligence. And it's just appalling. And actually, one disabled commentator in the British press was commenting today that disabled people so often get forgotten in this coverage.
Yep.
And everybody talks about, could you flee? Could you do this? Could you do that? Can you leave hospital? And it's almost as if in the complete kind of blanket of ignorance, it doesn't matter what happens to disabled people. Well, of course it does.
Very similar to those who are disabled in Gaza.
Yeah,
as well,
exactly.
Indeed. Anita and Zoe, thank you very much. We'll be back with you just after this very short break. And we shall see you just a few minutes' time, including news. It's understood that the government intends to effectively scrap short prison sentences. That and the possible implications, plus other stories that are in the pages, we'll be having a look at in just a few minutes' time. Do stay with us. Hi there, very good evening and welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now is Zoe Williams and Anita Boateng. Welcome back, good to see you both. Let's have a look very briefly at some of the inside pages. Straight to the Times, page 2. Fewer criminals are going to jail, in part because of fewer shorter sentences. We all know about the drama of just 600 spaces left across the estate in terms of prison spaces. This is something that we understand Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, is going to lay out in proposals on Monday. I mean, what do you make of this, Anita?
Well, I should say I'm a former special advisor in the Ministry of Justice, and we had to grapple with this a great deal. And I was noting the number of the prison spaces. We were sort of at 83, 82,000 people in the prison estate back when I did the job. And actually, one of the things that the government's been grappling with is the fact that, honestly, with a lot more sentencing, a lot more tougher sentencing, capacity just isn't there to meet that. So I think that these are going to be quite controversial reforms, I think, but absolutely necessary if you're going to avoid basically having to let prisoners out.
But is this the right way of tackling it? What do you think, Zoe?
Well, look, this kind of figure of 600 places left masks the fact that those are going to be dispersed across the country, A. B, they're not going to all be in the right category of prison. So some of them will be in high security when they need a remand prison. Some of them will be in an open prison when they need high security. It's an absolute shambles. And then you look at the situation in Wandsworth, from which there was that escape so recently. And the reason that happened, as attested by Her Majesty of Prison Inspectorates, was that they was understaffed and the staff that were there were poorly trained. Right? So what we're looking at is persistent long-term underfunding by governments who then turn around and go, wow, what on earth has happened that we can't even manage to house our own prisoners? It was exactly what was always going to happen if you don't put enough money in, and it's exactly part of the same picture for which the kind of rivers are full of sewage and the NHS is falling down.
Okay.
So I'm not that surprised, I suppose, is the short answer.
In the 11 o'clock hour, we can talk about that in more detail. Let's look at one more story. Freddie Flintoff being very much at the forefront of our minds recently. Of course, he had a very bad accident filming Top Gear. We've seen him kind of trying to recover from the severe facial injuries you can see there, and he's going to get a £9 million handout, according to The Sun. Anita?
Yes, I mean, it's a dramatic amount of money. And I'm slightly surprised that the BBC doesn't have a sort of clause in there that says if you drive too fast, this stuff might happen. Obviously, I must confess, I haven't seen the Top Gear smash, so I have no idea what was the cause of it. But if true, I mean, it's quite an astonishing amount of money.
The thing is with Freddie Flintoff is that he was always like such a golden boy. He was such a looker. My first husband still has a portrait of him on the wall.
My husband has one too.
Oh, really?
Wow, heartthrob.
He's still a very handsome man.
Yeah, he is, but that will be why he got such a big payout, right? He'd be like, I'm a pretty boy.
I think
comment from me.
I think mentally it was a very tough time. I mean, he's given up the job, hasn't he? We haven't seen him on television for a very long time, so he's had a big impact on his earnings, and who knows the psychological impact of being involved in such
Of course. Thank you for bringing us back to reason.
That is what I'm here for, but it's nice to see him smiling again, isn't it? Because we haven't actually seen him very much in the last couple of years. So there you go. Thank you very much, Zoe and Anita.